third is Suarez. Goodell comes running in. He's under it, makes the catch. Here's the throw to the plate. It's in the air. He is out! Cameron Red hangs on! Oh, man, what a play! Deep to right field. Way up and way second
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Stupid Money Podcast. I am Alec, and as you can see if you're watching on YouTube, Sean is not here. Sean has some things he has to take care of. One of them includes taking a mental break from the Phillies. Cannot blame him. So to help me out this week, we have my friend Alex. Alex, how's it going?
Good, how are you? How's it going?
It's going good, as good as it can go, I guess, considering how this has been going. So let's get right into it. 4 and 11 in the last 15 games, and pretty much everything has been going bad. But in your opinion, what has been the worst thing over the last stretch of about 2 weeks?
I don't know if it's necessarily the worst, but probably the most frustrating. We knew going into the season, one of the biggest questions or concerns from outside was kind of the starting pitching. And it's been pretty good, I think, over the last few games, and they're just wasting starts. Like, realistically, if Kyle Gibson gives you 6 innings and 2 runs, you should probably win that game 9 times out of 10. So I just feel like the offense is too inconsistent, and it's been frustrating to watch. And they've been putting up runs, but in the last 15 games, they're 4 and 11 and 50 runs. So it's been some big outputs, but on average, it's like 3 runs a game, which with the bullpen, that's just not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. I think the problem has been they're scoring just enough where they're putting themselves in position to win, but it's like not enough to comfortably win. Like out of these 15 games, they've blown 3 of them with a save, but the truth was in all 3 of those games, they only had a 1-run lead. Mm-hmm. So it's not easy. I mean, look, we want Knebel to be perfect. The problem is he hasn't been. But when there's no room for error, like that's what the issue is. When you literally can't give up anything without it being a problem, you don't win often. And, it's been 3 blown saves. And then yesterday, the first Giants game, the home run in extras. So it's 4 games that kind of been on the bullpen, but at the same time just haven't scored a lot. But I mean, 4 games. A 4-game switch is actually a lot if you think about it. They're 21, 28 right now. They'd be 25, 23 or something like that. Or 25, 24. Yeah. If it was flipped, I mean, that's just an insane difference at this point in the year.
I feel like it's just the same story every year. You're just looking at games that the bullpen gave up, and you just even flip a quarter of them around, and they win much more than 82 games last year, and we're not sitting here with a playoff drought trying to put the pieces together and figure out which flip needs to be switched so that they could kind of get on a roll and get going in the right direction.
Yeah. I think, the defense has gotten a little worse lately. It was bad at the beginning of the year. Then I thought when they were winning, maybe it wasn't getting better. It's just when they were out in LA, they hit so well, no one noticed. When they played the Rockies, the Rockies were worse defensively, so no one noticed. But the past 2 weeks, it's been very noticeable, especially when you play some sound teams like the Braves and the Mets, where they're not making a lot of mistakes. The Phillies' mistakes were amplified. There was the ball in Atlanta that went between Quinn and Castellanos that pretty much cost them that game. There was Schwarber and Herrera had an issue that cost runs. It's pretty much everybody is making a little mistake. Stott made a mistake the other day that cost a couple of runs, and then finally Hoskins over kind of airmailed a throw to second where Camargo had to come off the bag. They get no outs, and it leads to like 3 runs. Only one was earned a Wheeler, and then they lose the game by a run in extras.
Yeah, it's weird to say too because Harper's not like an elite level defender. I think he's gotten better since he's come to Philly, but even with Castellanos and Wright, you could see how much they miss Harper in the Mets series. They're just running on shallow fly balls to home plate, and it's not even really a contest because one, the arm strength's not there where it is with Harper, and two, the accuracy's not there. Like they don't. It's kind of just like disregarding the outfield. If there's a fly ball and there's a guy on third, it's basically a run.
Yeah, the Phillies honestly have to have the worst collective arm group in the majors right now in the outfield, especially now that Quinn probably will not play much anymore with Moniak coming back. But that has been the problem. I think, Castellanos has looked kind of lost in right field at times. I think, he's not really used to some of these outfields as much as Harper is. Harper played his whole career in this division. He's played at Citi Field probably almost 80 times now. He's played at Citizens Bank a couple hundred times now. Like he's more used to how these outfields react, and Castellanos, he takes some really bad routes. He looks really awkward when he's running out there. It just has not been great every day having him out there.
Yeah, I think him having to play every day too with Harper's UCL, it's starting to wear on him a little bit. He looks fatigued out there sometimes, and just he plays it cautious because he's just been on his feet every day because they don't really have many off days built in yet. So him going out there every day, it looks like it's taking a toll on him.
Yeah, definitely. And the problem is then when it's late in a game and they want to bring in like Quinn as a defensive sub, then you have an issue like the other night in New York where then the lead goes and you need to go to extras and Bryce Harper doesn't get to swing because the Mets have no respect for Quinn where they intentionally walk Harper. So then you pretty much lose the game because Quinn is your last hope there. And that's the issue they're kind of running into is that they pretty much have to swap the entire outfield for offense for defense. And then when you need offense again, it's gone.
Yeah, that was one of the big, if not the biggest thing with signing Castellanos. Harper finally had righty protection other than Hoskins, who hits 210. Yeah. Like he finally had a big bat that could get on base and not just allow them to flip lefties or walk Harper the entire year. And once you get to the late innings and you have to substitute it, you kind of just lose all advantages that you had with the depth in the lineup when Quinn has to hit in extras.
Yeah, it has been a problem. So I wanted to move on to Joe Girardi because there is a lot to get into with him. He's still here. I think a lot of some people might still be surprised by that. I'm not overly surprised he's still here. I don't see them firing a manager before the 4th of July, really, no matter how bad it is.
Especially while Gabe's in town. They're not going to give him that satisfaction.
No, that is a bad look if they do that. I mean, he definitely enjoys what's going on. There's no doubt about it. I mean, if you look at his roster and you look at Joe's, you would not imagine which guy is over 500 by 5-6 games or whatever. The other guy.
Even last year, he had the best record in the National League. And they were pinching pennies, it seems, out west. And then this year, one guy's over 500 and one guy's 6 games under. It's pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I like yesterday, Wilmer Flores hits 3rd for them. He hit like 8th for the Mets in 2015.
Yeah,
he's hitting 3-run home runs or 2-run home runs that changed the whole complexion of a game yesterday. And then they have Evan Longoria, who is not 2010 Rays Evan Longoria, but it doesn't seem to matter. They just always are in a position to win. It's so weird to think about.
Yeah, it seems like I haven't watched too many Giants games, pretty much only when they play the Phillies, but it seems like every button that he pushes, it just seems to work, whether it's the bullpen or a pinch hitter. It just always seems to come up the right way for Kapler, which it never did when he was here.
Yeah, it's like the talent level too isn't. It's honestly better here, I would say, than.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Just they're kind of like money balling it, but it's like to an extreme in a way. It's a little crazy. But back on Girardi, he's made a lot of mistakes lately with the bullpen. A lot of people got mad at him with what happened in Atlanta, where Harper hits the 2-run go-ahead home run in the ninth. And honestly, I just think Girardi didn't expect them to come back in that game. So no one was up, and they were left with Nick Nelson, who had just pitched the eighth, to come back in. And the first three guys reach, and the game is over there, pretty much. It ends there. Now, the defensive thing did help, but game's pretty much over there. And Knable had pitched the first 2 days, and Girardi has a rule about guys pitching 3 days in a row. And then it comes out the next day that Knable was like, no, I tried to get myself in there to pitch, and Joe said no. So it's just a really bad look. So I just want to get your thoughts. Girardi's always like, well, I need to save these guys for later, but if you keep losing now, there is no later.
Yeah, the biggest thing with the bullpen, I don't think he even knows what he wants to do. Like, I've seen better structured pitching rotations in like a little league team, honestly. Like, how is Nick Nelson going for a 6-out save one night in Atlanta, which he didn't look bad in the eighth. Like, he was effective in the eighth inning. And it's just, I think at the beginning of the year, they said his career high in pitches was like 18. And his first outing, Girardi runs him for like 39 plus. I just don't understand how one game he's going for a 6-out save, and then 2 or 3 games later he's coming in the fourth inning. I just can't. I don't think he knows if his high leverage guys are high leverage guys or if they're mop up guys. I just think it's all one big cluster to him, and he just picks a random guy, pulls straws, and sees who he wants to put out.
Yeah, outside of Knable, it honestly has felt that way. And, part of the problem has been kind of Ranger Suarez has been kind of an issue in a way. He's not given up a ton of runs or anything like that, but his pitch counts have been racked up so high where he's out at, like tonight, he was out by the fifth. Mm-hmm. He's out in 4 or 5 innings, and maybe he's not giving up the 5 or 6 front, like he's not getting blown up or anything, but he's just not going deep enough to where this bullpen is getting rest, where then it's 4 or 5 guys every time he's out there.
It just seems like Ranger's not missing bats, and he's getting into 7 or 8 pitch at bats where his pitch count's piling up. And like you said, he's not giving up runs. It seems like his walk rate's up more this year.
Yeah.
But he's just getting into deep at bats, which aren't necessarily hurting him in the short term. But then you look in the fourth inning and he's at 85 pitches. And it just seems like every inning's a battle for him. And he, other than like maybe a 3-inning stretch in the one Dodgers game when he pitched out in LA, he really hasn't looked good at all this year.
Now, I think part of the problem is he is a ground ball guy, and it seems that Bohm has had his worst moments with Suarez on the mound. Mm-hmm. The 3 error, I hate this place thing was a Suarez game. Tonight, Bohm has already made a couple mistakes in this game with Suarez on the mound. And just kind of like, do you put Camargo on third every time Suarez pitches, and then you're kind of limiting your offense because then either Gregorius, who's starting a rehab assignment, or Stott, who's hitting like 110, has to play short. And, it's lessening a lineup that's already struggling. And I think that's kind of an issue they're having with when Suarez starts right now.
I think that going forward, you might see them do that more, just because I saw a tweet yesterday. I forget who put it out, but even though Bohm's batting average is relatively high, all things considered, given if you look up and down the lineup, it's one of the higher ones. Right. His OPS is below that of Schwarber, JT, Castellanos, who have been about as cold as you could get for stretches during the season. And while it seems like Bohm's been pretty consistent, he's poking singles, and they moved him back down to 6. And if he's poking singles in the 6th spot when you're following up with whether it's Moniak, Herrera, Camargo, it just seems like they're kind of baseless singles because you're not sticking them in front of Harper. So Going forward, you might see them throw Camargo out there and want Didi's back just to get more of a defensive look.
Yeah, I can see that. I still think for the way this team is constructed right now, the best place for Bohm is leadoff, because if you lead off, you can poke singles all you want.
Yeah.
You want to get on base. I still think their best top 3 would be Bohm, Segura, Harper. I'm way more in favor of putting these high contact guys in front of him than kind of these 3 true outcome guys like Hoskins and Schwarber. I just think long term that's a better solution.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm looking at the lineup, and you just see the 180 Schwarber, the 210 Hoskins at the top, and while their walk rate might be somewhat higher than Bohm's, it's just not enough to justify the the drastic difference in their approach to the lineup.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the walk thing in a minute because I did find that interesting. But quick, well, to finish up Girardi, you brought this up to me the other night about how players don't look like they're having fun, like the parents are saying it. I found the article; it was by Alex Coffey at the Inquirer, and it was interesting. I mean, it doesn't look like they're having fun. And I look at Castellanos, and I look at highlights from like his Reds days, and the jersey is like half the way buttoned down. Like there's big chains under there, like he's prancing around when he hits home runs and all that. And this year, he's buttoned all the way up. He seems quiet. Like Harper's an energetic guy. Haven't really seen a lot out of him. You know, I just it seems weird. There's not the only guy that has shown emotion really has been Camargo in that Sunday night game against the Mets where they came back. He was the only guy that looked fired up. Like he was on base when Castellanos had to go ahead home run. He looked like the most excited guy at home plate. And then the bottom of that inning makes a diving catch and he's like fist pumping, pounding his chest. And I'm like, where's everyone else? No one seems to care.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway, I read that article yesterday, and the biggest takeaway for me was Gibson had his parents talk to him. That was kind of the start of the whole article. And he came in from Texas last year at the deadline. Castellanos said he also had family members talk to him about it, and he came in this year from Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And then the two guys who mostly denied it were Girardi and Hoskins, who's homegrown, which all he's ever known is the kind of quote unquote Phillies culture. And it's just been losing season after losing season. So the guys who are denying that the energy is kind of not there are homegrown guys and Girardi, who has to say it for the sake of his job because he's not going to say that it's his fault.
Right.
And even like you brought up Harper, the Sunday night game when he was mic'd up, I mean, it was just miserable to listen to. Granted, he was DHing, not in the field, so he's trying his best to be engaged. But I mean, it was just miserable to listen to him talk to Ravitch and just go through the motions with having to have the microphone on. It just doesn't seem like they want to be there. And I don't know how you go about changing it unless you either break up the core or kind of go a different route at manager.
Yeah, I mean, I think manager is what goes first because it's a lot more difficult to move players, especially this time of year. And like the thing about Girardi is Sunday night, during the game, they show a pre-recorded interview that his old teammate David Cohn, who's now one of the ESPN Sunday night announcers, had with him, and he's asking him, he's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And he's like, "Oh, these guys are too good. Like it'll come around eventually. Like they'll get going." And then he kind of repeated that yesterday after the loss. He's like these guys are like the names are too big, the numbers are too big. Like it'll come around. And like that kind of thought process to me concerns me because it's just like it's to me that sounds like he's not going to do anything to change. He's going to wait for what has happened in the past to happen again when in baseball we've kind of learned lately, guys don't get paid as much for what they've done in the past. Guys aren't projected, people don't project this season off what past seasons have been. The game has just changed so much. And I think he's still in that old mindset of thinking because he's like an older school guy. And it's kind of been a problem where no one is showing any urgency because they just think it'll get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and it seems like he's slowly changing his stance. And he's starting to realize where he's at. It went from in the last week you could see all of his interviews went from it's still early to yesterday it was you can't say it's early anymore, but they're going to turn around. I just don't know how 50 games in, you're already 11, 10 and a half, whatever it is, back in the division. I think it's almost fair to say with the way the Mets are going, it's just it doesn't seem like the division's realistic.
No.
And I think one of the biggest differences is the difference in style between Showalter and Girardi. Like the Mets were getting hit in the second week by pitches, and they weren't even the top in the league in terms of hit by pitch, but he just went in and was like, it's us against the world. And then Girardi's sitting there and a big moment happens, and Schwarber's the one who has to blow up on Angel Hernandez, not Girardi. He's in the dugout, and he doesn't come out of the dugout until Schwarber gets tossed. Like it just seems like he's lifeless. His head's deep in the binder of analytics, whatever he likes doing in the dugout, and it just doesn't seem like he's as interested as a manager of a team that's really struggling should be.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people have looked for them to replace him with a guy like straight out of the game, Raul Ibanez, Placido Polanco. They both come up.
I saw an interesting name today. A lot of people were going like the Jim Leland route in terms of career success, Dombrowski guy, but I don't think that'd be the best because we saw kind of what Tony La Russa is doing in Chicago, and they're really underperforming.
Yeah.
So it just seems like the older guy is not ideal for today's game. And I don't think one of the bench coaches or Dusty Wathan's necessarily the answer. Somebody on Twitter said maybe Sam Fold coming out of the GM role and sliding in. I mean, he's the GM, so he has kind of the inside track of the roster and how it's constructed. Mm-hmm. He retired in 2015, so he's been in the game when the analytics first kind of started to take over. And I think he's a young, relatable guy who's fresh out of the game. And I think he's really good as a GM or assistant to the GM, wherever he is. So, and he interviewed for the Red Sox job when they were trying to figure out what the whole core situation. So I think if they go away from Girardi soon, I think that'd be a good option. And I think that would help long-term if they parted from Girardi, because then you could see if it's a core issue with the players. If they respond to a different manager, then maybe they get going and you realize you have a good group. But if they still can't get going, then you might have to make a move that shakes up the core, whether it's Hoskins, Realmuto, something along those lines.
Yeah, I do think that if it's a roster move, the list is Hoskins 1, Segura might be 2. I think just because maybe they don't want to pay him. He's been good, but he's also kind of like a career losing player. Been, and I think then Realmuto has to be 3. I mean, he was on some bad Marlins teams.
I almost think Segura is 2nd, just if you're looking for value back, because what is Hoskins' value realistically anymore?
Yeah, I do think if they do want to get something in return, Segura is the one. I think if they're way out of it, he's the guy that does go at the deadline. Him and Gibson probably go. Yeah, that's why I was a little surprised to see the Eflin extension for next year, because I could see them trying to flip him if things got really bad, but I don't think they'll get there now. So yeah, the roster's kind of step 2 though, like we said. I do think if actually they do fire Girardi this year, it'll be between Waltham and Fold for the job, like to take over this year. Maybe not long term, but I do think it'll be one of those 2 guys this year. So I just want to move on quick to the offense, because as everybody knows, and we talked about earlier, the offense has not been kind of what we thought it was, and there's been maybe less home runs than people thought, less doubles for sure, but I really think the biggest problem has been the lack of walking. I don't know what you think about that, but I'm going to go through some numbers quick. So we're about 1/3 the way through the year. So Harper has 13 walks, which puts him on pace for 45 or something like that. He had 100 last year.
Yeah, I was looking at Savant a little bit. His walk rate's down 10% this year from last year.
Like he's hitting 300 and his on base percentage is like in the 340s. When Bryce Harper hits 300, his on base percentage is 400.
Yeah, he should be a 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 guy every year in terms of batting average, on base slugging.
Yeah, and maybe part of that is they're fearing Castellanos behind him too. He's getting more pitches to hit than normal, which is a thing. Then I also look at a guy like Hoskins has actually only played 2 full seasons in the majors, but those two full seasons he had 87 walks and then 116 walks. He has 22, which puts him on pace for like 66. So his numbers are down. The only guy who's kind of around their normal walk numbers would be Schwarber, who he averages 60, 70 a year. He's at 28 right now. So he'll get to his numbers, but his batting average is way down. So I just think the problem is there's not enough guys getting on base. They're hitting a lot of solo home runs again, which was the problem last year. I just feel like they're not like when I watch the Dodgers and the Giants, every time I've looked up when the Phillies have played them, it feels like every other inning there's two guys on base. The Phillies, it's like 3 innings, no one gets on, and then they'll have like a 3-run inning because two guys will finally get on. Maybe they hit a 3-run home run or a gap or score two. And then it's like 3 more innings of nobody getting on. I just think they're too inconsistent with what they're doing and not walking, not putting enough balls in play, putting pressure on the defense, looking for errors has been the problem. They've been too much of the 3 true outcomes, but not enough of the walking part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I looked at the lineup tonight, and it's Schwarber, Segura, Harper, Castellanos, Hoskins, JT, Bohm, and then Mickey and Camargo. So the first 7 are kind of guys that you penciled in to be like the key contributors this year, and every single one of their walk rates is down this year. None of them are walking more than normal. They're all lower than their typical percentages. And I think the biggest thing that was sure we expected the offense to do more in terms of home runs, slugging, stuff like that. But one of the biggest draws with the offense was they were going to work pitching down and kind of over a 3-game series, they were going to abuse bullpens, get deep into pens early in the series, and kind of just kill starting rotations. And it seems like they haven't done that. Like Logan Webb had like double-digit strikeouts yesterday, and he went into the 9th.
Yeah,
Like that shouldn't happen against a team that's having good at bats consistently. I don't know if it's Long's approach with just coming in first pitch swinging. I don't know if that's the way that he thinks they're going to succeed, but with the way that the lineup's built, I just don't think that's how they should go about it. I think they should work more into accounts and kind of just attack bullpens from early on, try and get to them as early as possible.
Yeah, I mean, even let alone the walking thing, I just don't feel like they're grinding enough. Like they're not fouling off a lot of balls. Like watching that Mets series and Mark Canha, like that guy works. Like he'll foul off 4 or 5 pitches in at bat. Like it seems like that Sunday game, all of his at bats were like 8 or 9 pitches. Like those guys are putting stress on pitchers. Like Lindor's putting stress on them. Nimmo does. Even Escobar doesn't have a high average, but he does. Like the Phillies, I feel like, and part of it is like Harper's in this like swing early thing this year, which I don't understand. Like they're not making guys earn it. I like they're not waiting for the guy's mistake pitch. They're like forcing the issue too much, and that's kind of what the problem has been.
Yeah, and it just seems like the Mets single guys to death. Like they just beat the shift every at bat. They'll cap off a 10-pitch at bat with beating the shift, and the Phillies will get up there, and it just seems like first pitch slider, ground out to the second baseman. It just seems like they don't work deep enough, and then when they do, it just seems like every Schwarber 9-pitch at bat ends in a strikeout.
Yeah, they're not rewarding themselves enough.
Nope.
It doesn't feel like they're trying. It's hard to explain. The pitching staff, the starters for the most part have been good. I mean, kind of wrapping it all together here. The bullpen is still an issue like it has been in years past. It's not. Is it historically bad like years past? No. But some of the moves have been so confusing to me. Like I don't understand how James Norwood is still here and then Francisco Morales is down in AAA with an ERA under 1. I don't get.
He didn't look bad in the Dodgers series either. He walked
like
a guy or two, but I mean the stuff was there and he worked out of it.
Yeah, I don't understand the thought process there. I still think maybe they're better off if you can find a starter at the deadline if they're going to buy, which right now I don't think they are. But if they get to that point,
I don't want to see them trade for a corpse of a reliever. You know, like it seems like every year it's just like Workman. I mean, even when they don't trade for a corpse, like David Phelps had like a sub-2 ERA before he came over from Milwaukee, and then he was like the worst reliever in the second half. It just seems like that happens every year. Would you switch Sir Anthony to the closer role?
I don't know if we're going to see it tonight because it's now 3-1 Giants, but I think they're going that way. There's the whole thing with, is Dombrowski going to let Girardi do that? Is he going to allow him kind of like, is Dombrowski going to swallow his pride and say the guy gave $10 million in the
Mhm.
offseason is no longer our closer. I think that plays into it. I also don't know, like the last time when Gabe put Sir Anthony in the closer's role, he did struggle too. I don't know if he doesn't like the added pressure. He does well in his 8-inning, 7-inning roles. So I think they need to get to that point, maybe until Knebel gains some confidence back, because it just seems like he is hanging. He's
Yeah,
balls.
I don't think he's accepted that he's now 94, 96, and not the 97, 99 that he was.
Yeah. I,
Um, I would I would be interested to see if they went Hand as the closer. He's 21 games this year. He's got a 1.29 ERA, and he's top 4 percentile in the majors in terms of hard hit percentage. So guys aren't really barreling him up. But the only problem with that is he's the only lefty in the bullpen,
yeah.
and I I'd almost rather just keep him as kind of the lefty guy and not have to deal with Jose Alvarado innings because they're just a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah, because that one reason I don't think we see him become the closer, but I mean, it could get to that point, especially if they find a lefty they like at the deadline or something. I I don't know. I like David Bednar, the Pirates closer. He is
Mm-hmm.
on a run. The Pirates can ask for a haul, and unless the Phillies are really bounced back, I don't see them giving up a haul for a closer. I will say though, I think if you can find a 5 that eats up innings and you move Ranger back to the bullpen, I mean, we'll
Yeah,
see how that goes.
yeah.
That could work. That looks like the most likely option at this point.
I guess they kind of tried to do that with Falter too to see if that was an option, but I hope that didn't screw up the rotation in terms of messing up the routine with guys giving them like the extra day off. I get you're saving innings and kind of giving them an extra day to recover, but I don't know. If the rotation was going so well on that West Coast trip, and starters are creatures of habit, and
Yeah.
just giving them that extra day off, I just hope that didn't mess anything up.
Now, I mean, that's something I could go on about for like 40 minutes about the whole Bailey Falter against the Mets thing. Like, you need to win those games.
It
How do you
just
not? Yeah,
it seemed like he was conceding from the jump.
that bringing him up for that game made zero sense to me. How do you not go Eflin, Wheeler, Gibson in that series? How do you not
Mm-hmm.
see the importance of trying to get every inch out of that series that you could possibly get? And Bailey Falter, that was just
Especially because you
confusing.
don't see them for a while now after that series,
Yeah,
and they're going to get their guys back soon from injury. DeGrom seems like he's working his way back. It just wasn't smart.
Yeah, no, that was your swing. That was your chance to get a swing at them, build some momentum. And I feel like, the way they went about that Friday game, just it started off on the wrong foot and everything snowballed from there.
Mm-hmm.
That was not a good decision at all.
Yeah, definitely set the tone for the series.
Yeah, it wasn't good. Well, we're gonna look ahead a little here as we wind things down. The Phillies are currently down 3-1 in the 6 of the Giants. So if they fall today, they will be 21-29, which apparently is the lowest point. It's the lowest point of the Harper era, and it's the
Mm-hmm.
lowest point even of like the Reese Hoskins era, which
Yeah,
is like they have never been that far under 500 since like Michael Franco was the star of this team. Like that's crazy to think about.
yeah, it's definitely not encouraging. And then I saw an article today that it was either Heyman or Rosenthal wrote that they're going to be buyers at the deadline. I don't know. The second half of the schedule just lightens up with all those like Nationals games, Pirates games, but
Yeah.
I can't trust them to win those games because they haven't shown me in the last 3 years since this core has kind of been together outside of Castellanos and Schwarber that they could win those games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked about this before with Sean on here. They have 45 games against the Nats, Pirates, Reds, and D-backs down the stretch of the season. And we were kind of like, this rough stretch ends on June 9th when you're done with the Brewers. But the problem is, by the time you get there, I mean, if they lose tonight, they're 8 under.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? They have another game against the Giants tomorrow. Then they have 3 against the Angels, who are finally seem to have figured it out. And then you have the 3 against Milwaukee, who's in first place in the Central. If they're 10, 11 games under 500 by that point, like unless they go 35-10 against those teams, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you're asking them to play like 750 the rest of the way, and it's just not realistic.
No, it's not, especially because, outside of the Harper thing, they have gotten relatively lucky with injuries. I feel like that might not, especially if it's one of the starters, they're in big trouble.
Yeah, Wheeler's looked much better, but I'm still cautious with this shoulder after
Yeah.
the innings he put up last year and the slow start. I can't fully say that we're out of the woods with that one yet.
Yeah, no. I thought maybe best case, or kind of I guess a best worst case, if the way you want to put it, coming out of this stretch of May and early June for the Phillies was if they're like 3 or 4, maybe even 5 games under 500. I feel like that's manageable with how easy it is the rest of the way. But this hole is getting too deep now, where it's like I don't know if it is. Like if they lose tonight too, like it's going to be an issue. There are easy games down the stretch, but I don't think it's gonna matter if they lose the next 7 games. If they lose 5 of them, like they're done.
Yeah, they have to at least win one of the series, like at least, and they can't get swept at all. And even then, you're probably still sitting 6 or 7 under 500. It's just not ideal for where team. I mean, last year they weren't playing great in July, and then at the start of August they kind of got going a little bit,
Right.
and with the Mets series and everything. But even then, you didn't have as much of a hole as you do now.
No, exactly. The hole has never been this deep. So, I mean, it is a problem. All right, so we're going to wrap it up here. Just a couple, I'm going to give my final thoughts, and then you can give yours like we always do at the end of the show. My first one is, honestly, that Sunday game that they blew to the Dodgers has turned out to be such a killer. If they win that game, they just sweep the Dodgers in LA, and they're over 500 if they win that game, is what I want to point out. They get 2 outs, no one on, and then 3 straight guys reach base and they lose. And it was on Knebel. And I just feel like, to me, that game was the difference. Like, that game is what snowballed. That was the game that started this 4-11 stretch they're on. I just feel like if they win that game, we might be in a totally different position right now. That game has by far, when I point back and like, well, this is where I think the season turned. Like, that game to me is not even the 7-1 game, because I feel like they kind of fought back enough after that game to get to 500 and whatnot. That game to me is the game that we're going to look back and say, like, yeah, I think that's where that's what killed them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of going on another Dodgers game. After Muncy made that error and they won, you kind of, a normal baseball team would kind of get some momentum. We just got gifted one against the best roster in the sport. I don't know if we could say best team right now, but best roster in the sport.
Mm-hmm.
A normal team would kind of, take that and run with it, but they did the exact opposite and just had an awful series against the Padres, and then went to Atlanta and took. If you told me that they split in Atlanta, I'd be happy considering how bad they normally struggle there. But I mean, even
the way it happened,
it sucks the wins right out of the sails. Like, it's just not. They don't lose in normal ways. It's just a new way every night.
Yeah, it's not fun. It is a new way every night, which has kind of been, it's either one night they don't hit, or one night they lose 8-6 and they have 3 errors, or they lose 4-5 and they blow a save in the 9th. It is getting ridiculous. And then the final thing I want to leave on, and I'll let you have one last say too. They have the same amount of wins as the Orioles, and the Phillies payroll is like 240 million. I think the Orioles is like 30 or 40 million.
I think it's 35. Yeah.
Yeah, that is just insane to even comprehend right now. That is just beyond ridiculous. I can't even believe we're at this point in where it's now June, and that is a thing. I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's rough. My last thing, I know I texted you yesterday during the game. I mean, we all knew how it was going to end after Schwarber tied it up.
Yeah, I didn't get excited.
I'm not ashamed to admit I started looking up 2023 draft prospects to see who they could get in the top 10. And I think we're gonna go center fielder from Vanderbilt. I already decided it, so
Okay.
be on the lookout for that.
All right, we will take a look at that. Maybe one of these years when the Phillies are bad, there'll actually be like a shoe-in good draft prospect for once.
Yeah, not Moniak at 1.
Yeah, it would be nice. All right,
Hopefully.
guys, thanks for listening or watching. If you're watching on YouTube, big thanks to Alex for filling in for Sean. Hopefully, Phillies win a few games so Sean's mental sake gets better. He's been in rough shape after the whole Sixers loss, Embiid not get the MVP. I think the Eagles draft helped him out, but hopefully he gets he gets back to where he needs to be. He can no longer say that I'm the one that's missed a podcast now too. So we're even. Alex, it was great talking to you. Thanks for coming
Yeah.
on.
Thanks for having me.
No problem.